I'm a little disappointed with this one. Bright Memory Infinite has finally been released. I have been looking forward to this game for years now. If you aren't familiar with Bright Memory, it's a game that was primarily made by one person, Zhang Shoncheng, also known as FYQD. The fact that this game was being developed by primarily one person really caught my attention, and it was really looking good. Last year, he released Bright Memory. Originally, Bright Memory was sold as an early access title. Shortly after its release, FYQD changed the idea from it being early access to being an Episode 1 demo type of thing, with an Episode 2 going to be a full-length game. Best of all, players who purchased the first Bright Memory demo would be receiving the full game, now titled Bright Memory Infinite, for free. I liked the Bright Memory demo. It was really looking promising. It provided an interesting gameplay experience, mixing elements from Shadow Warrior, Uncharted, and Devil May Cry. It featured first-person combat with a style combo meter and Uncharted's puzzle solving and linear exploration. It only took me about a half hour to beat the first one, but it was a demo, so I was fine with it, especially with a full-length game to look forward to, continuing the story started here and improving on the gameplay mechanics. Well, I wouldn't really call Bright Memory Infinite a full game either. One playthrough of Bright Memory Infinite took me about 2.5 hours, about 2 hours longer than one playthrough of the original Bright Memory. And while I attest that game length isn't a determinant of quality, I mean my favorite game of all time is Mega Man X, which you can beat in just a couple of hours too, Bright Memory Infinite still feels less like a complete game and more like a collection of decent ideas held back by spotty execution. Before I get into the nitty-gritty, I just want to say Bright Memory Infinite isn't a bad game. It's just kind of average. I paid less than $10 for the original Bright Memory and got Infinite for free, so it's not a full-priced game, though it's currently priced at $20, so compare that to other indie games at that price point, like Dusk is also $20. It's still impressive that this game was made primarily by one person. I am not a game dev, and I definitely would not have been able to make something like this, so big props to FYQD. It's still an impressive feat despite some of the criticisms that I have. Anyways, Bright Memory Infinite finds the player once again playing as Shelia, a SRO agent who is tasked with investigating a strange black hole phenomenon occurring. I'm going to be completely honest, the story is pretty non-existent. Like, there are cutscenes and dialogue pushing the plot forward, but it's pretty generic and not a lot is explained. Like, the black hole is never explained, it's never explained why Shelia is teleporting to different time periods, or what these ancient warrior monsters are, or who these bosses are, or what the entire purpose of anything is. There isn't much connecting it to the original Bright Memory either. The narratives are almost completely disconnected. So just accept that the story really isn't important. Some things just really don't make sense.
Looks like they're gone.
Even the source of Shelia's powers seem redesigned. In the first game, they were telekinetic abilities, whereas in this game, they're more of technological abilities granted from her suit. As always, a bad story doesn't really ruin a game for me, but it's worth noting. The gameplay is similar to the original Bright Memory. The original game controlled pretty good. Movement was really fast and responsive, shooting felt good, and all the guns gave good feedback. I liked the telekinetic abilities and sword abilities in the first game. That said, I do think the sword combat was greatly improved in Infinite. I like that you can now freely use the sword as opposed to using it as a skill on a cooldown like the original game handled it. You can quickly switch between shooting and slashing, greatly improving your offensive abilities. They also added blocking and parrying mechanics, which add more defensive strategy to your playstyle. The parry is especially useful against melee enemies with armor. It causes them to falter a bit and also damages their shields. You can also parry bullets and other projectiles. I really liked parrying these guys' arrows back at them, and chaining parries always feels satisfying. I also think the shooting still feels pretty good. There are 4 guns, an assault rifle, which you start with, a shotgun, a pistol, and a sniper rifle. All 4 of these guns are fun to use and have their uses in combat. I definitely like using all of the various guns, even if no-scoping with the sniper rifle is pretty impossible. Though the assault rifle definitely feels overpowered and can basically be used in every situation effectively. Every gun has a secondary fire that can be upgraded. These secondary fires are devastating. The assault rifle shoots explosive rounds that have some homing, the shotgun launches fireballs, the pistol shoots grenades, and the sniper rifle shoots sticky explosives. I also think that the special abilities are fun to use, especially the ones where you throw your sword around and it spins around chasing enemies, and the super punch, which shoots out this huge fireball doing tons of damage. For all these improvements though, there are some things I think the original Bright Memory did better, and even some things that were in the original game that are not in this one that I really wish they would have kept in. While the movement still feels pretty good, it also feels slower and more restrained compared to that of the original game. You can still sprint and dash, but it's more toned down. In the original game, a dash would send you flying across the arena. In this game, it's just a little dash. I do kind of wish the dash still sent you flying like it did in the original game. It made that game feel faster and more chaotic and added a bit of an anime vibe to it. They also removed that little hover that you could do from the first game, where you could hold jump in the air and sit there for a little while shooting from the sky. The rest of the movement still feels pretty good. You still get the double jump. They added other things like clamber and wall running, which are fun, even if the wall running is a little underutilized. There are 2 significant negatives about the game combat though. The first is that the Devil May Cry-esque combo meter from the first game does not appear in Infinite. The first game encouraged you to utilize your entire arsenal of weapons and abilities to keep enemies floating and to inflict long strings of combos, and in order to keep those combos going, you needed to learn how to use all of your various attacks. This game doesn't do any of that. The second issue is that the guns are much more powerful and useful to use in the first game, especially once you max out their secondary fires, that you don't really ever need to use your sword or special moves. It's almost the reverse issue of the first Shadow Warrior game. In fact, using your fully upgraded special moves requires you to charge them up before attacking, and during this charge you can't run or dash, leaving you open to attack. So while these moves are devastating, the trade-off is that you could potentially die before you finish charging. So if you're faced with a cluster of enemies, and one upgraded firebomb from the shotgun will eliminate them, why even bother using your entire arsenal of attacks? Experience is arbitrarily awarded to you, so it doesn't matter if you combo. It doesn't matter if you use anything other than your guns. And since it will take you 2 playthroughs to even upgrade everything, I can see how it would be mumuch more beneficial to just upgrade your shotgun and assault rifle and call it a day. You don't even really need to worry about running out of ammo. I never ran out of primary ammo of any of my guns. There's full ammo pools in almost every room, so you don't even have running out of ammo to encourage you to use your sword. The only in-game incentive that you have for using all of your various guns and abilities are achievements, which will take you 3 or 4 playthroughs to complete them all. But if you're just playing through the game once and have no interest in playing it multiple times, you can really just beat the majority of the game with the assault rifle and shotgun. There really isn't much to enemy variety either. You have these typical soldier dudes, and these melee guys with staves and snipers, and then like ancient variations of them, guys with bows, swords, or hammers that function very similarly. There are these like dog monsters, though you only fight them twice throughout the whole game. The goblin troll-looking things, the 4-legged monsters, and the bats from the first game do not return, which is a bit of a shame because those enemies provided some variation to the combat experience in the original Bright Memory. The bats especially were aerial units. There are no new aerial enemies replacing them in Bright Memory Infinite. There are a handful of bosses. 2 of them are basically just bullet sponges. They don't really require any strategy or thought to beat them, just boil down to strafing around the arenas and shooting them. The other boss you actually fight twice. He's a swordsman with attacks to parry and a shield to break. He actually requires some thought, skill, precision, and strategy to defeat. You need to learn his attack patterns so you know when to dodge or when to parry. You have to time your parries correctly. You need to learn which guns and attacks break his shield fastest, and which moves can maximize your damage output during that brief falter window in between his shield regens. This boss fight was definitely a highlight of the gameplay experience. I don't want to come down too hard on the gameplay. I still had fun playing this game, especially on my second playthrough, once I upgraded everything to its fullest. Utilizing your arsenal to its fullest is a lot of fun. There's just no real incentive to do so, and it's actually much more efficient to just upgrade your secondary fires and use them to dispatch a room of enemies. And that's a little disappointing. Level design is also incredibly linear. There's really only one set path to follow, one way to tackle combat encounters. I don't necessarily think linearity is a bad thing. I mean, Doom Eternal can be considered pretty linear in terms of game design, but I just wish there was a little bit more to Bright Memory Infinite. Maybe some secret areas or something. The game gives you a double jump, a grapple hook, wall running, wall jumping, and they're very underutilized. You just kind of use them in set places to get from one part of the map to the next. I just feel like there was more potential for complex level design and platforming, especially with mechanics that are already in the game. The combat arenas especially could have benefited from more depth, to make it feel a little more open and give the player some freedom of choice with their gameplay. Something that really utilizes the enhanced mobility, the double jump, wall running, climbing, grapple hook, etc. Instead, they're just kind of open arenas with enemies to fight. Bright Memory Infinite completely ditched the Uncharted elements as well. It still has the health regen system instead of health packs, but the treasure hunting aspect is gone. There are these relics where you can pick up that grant you experience points, but they aren't hidden, they aren't unique, and you can't pick them up and look at them like in the first Bright Memory. There also isn't a single puzzle, something I was hoping they'd expound upon from the first Bright Memory, which had that switch puzzle towards the beginning. To switch up gameplay a bit though, there's a stealth section, where the game strips you of all of your weapons and abilities and you need to find a meat cleaver and go around killing enemies before they see you. As far as stealth sections and non-stealth games go, this one wasn't terrible. Enemies are very predictable and basically just walk back and forth on a set path. I do wish this section did have more mechanics though. Maybe something to distract enemies or different weapons that you could pick up and use. The stealth combat in general just felt off to me, like there was a delay or something from when you would click and when the execution would perform. It was just weird. Not horrible for a stealth section, but I wish it was more fleshed out and it just kind of felt tacked on. The last thing I want to comment on are the game's visuals. The game looks great for the most part. It almost looks like a modern AAA game with some really detailed graphics. Maybe not quite what a big name studio would put out on modern next-gen hardware, especially in terms of animations, but still a very good looking game, and is definitely improvement on the last game. Shelia's hair looks good, which is something I didn't think looked quite right from the first game. There were no skirt malfunctions this time around. The enemies look pretty cool. I will say I preferred Shelia's base design from the first Bright Memory. It just had a little bit more character and uniqueness to it versus this kind of like leather jacket look she's got going on now. There's also some visual issues with some of the alternate skins in this game, mainly in how the grapple hook looks. It just kind of comes out of her hand, which is weird. There's an option to put the glove back on, but then it just reverts the first person look back to the default skin completely. I know you can still see the skin that you have equipped in the cutscenes, but it just kind of defeats the purpose to me. All in all, Bright Memory Infinite is a fun game that has some good ideas that I feel just weren't pushed enough. The combat is fun and fluid. You can pull off some cool combos with your arsenal, but there really isn't any incentive to do so. The stealth section just kind of feels underdeveloped and tacked on to add some differentiation. There are mechanics like wall running or wall jumping, which are only used like once or twice in the game. I think there's a solid foundation here, and like I said, I still think that overall this is a very impressive creation by FYQD. But it still feels kind of like a demo to me. I'm interested to see what FYQD does in the future. I hope he continues to create and improve upon Bright Memory, because there's a really solid foundation there, and I think it could become something great.
So this plan of yours is supposed to change the world? Bullshit.